Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Weaponized Body podcast. As always, my name is Dr. Ryan Hewitt, and I'm here to give you another wonderful episode on all things health, performance, and recovery. Today, I'm going to talk about an episode that I've been saving for a little while. And this one has come up more and more lately because of a lot of discussions about things like testosterone replacement therapy, hormones in general for both men and women. And there's one thing that I'm running into because I'm seeing more and more people switch over to my weaponized wellness services because of improper or negligent or just like lazy medicine when it comes to hormone therapy. And one of the things that I see a lot is something called Enclomiphene or SERMs, right? Selective Estrogen Receptor Modulators given to men for quote unquote testosterone replacement therapy. So SERMs like Enclomiphene or Clomid, right? They're marketed as like natural testosterone boosters without TRT injections, which is complete bullshit. Because they are not testosterone replacement therapy. So they don't replace testosterone at all. They don't actually fix broken systems. What they do is they stimulate an already stressed system in hopes that you get a good result or that it responds well for you. And to tell you the truth, occasionally it does. I have had some men in some circumstances where the therapy made sense and it actually ended up getting a good result. But this is fewer cases than you'd think. Sometimes is not a strategy, right? So like you don't want to be just hoping and praying that sometimes it works, especially when you're talking about hormones with both men and women. But we'll talk about guys specifically taking this for testosterone replacement, and they're looking for improvement in symptoms like confidence, energy, libido, long-term health, just masculinity in general. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about what SERMs actually do, selective estrogen receptor modulators, when they might make sense, and why they fail, generally speaking, as a primary therapy, and why so many men feel that their numbers improve on their blood work, but actually their life does not. So let's hit on what these SERMs actually do. So their job is not to increase testosterone directly. So what they do is they block estrogen receptors at the hypothalamus in your brain. And what it does is it tricks the brain into thinking that your estrogen levels are low. And what this does is this results in the pituitary being forced to release more what's called luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone. Luteinizing hormone is to stimulate the testes to make testosterone. Follicular stimulating hormone is to stimulate sperm production. So you're using this medication in hopes that the testes respond in making more testosterone, clearly, unless you're using this as a fertility treatment, right? So instead of like, here's the testosterone your body needs, it's like, hey, brain, tell the testes to make more, please. Okay. Now, this entire approach assumes one, that your pituitary gland is healthy. Number two, that your testes are responsive and will make testosterone. Number three, that your sex hormone binding globulin will not spike and eat up all of your testosterone or bind to all your testosterone, leaving you with, not very much free testosterone, which your body uses, to attach to androgen receptors to give you the result. Number four, that your estrogen metabolism is healthy and normal. And number five, that your nervous system will tolerate this estrogen receptor manipulation. So there's a lot of assumptions when it comes to delivering this treatment. And I'm going to tell you why that this SERM approach fails in most cases. Number one, if you're somebody that has primary hypogonadism. So I've defined this in other podcasts that I've done. Essentially, very simply, primary hypogonadism, it means that your testes are the problem. Your testes fail to make testosterone. This could mean that your Leydig cells in your testes are damaged. Just generally speaking, your testicular tissue is unresponsive. So in other words, like this LH signal can scream all day long and nothing will happen. These are men where you'll see like an unnaturally high luteinizing hormone signal, yet they have low testosterone. So giving Enclomiphene here, like, literally doesn't make sense, because it's like flooring the gas pedal when you're stuck in park, right? So what you get is an even higher luteinizing hormone, no testosterone increase, and literally you're just, dealing with, no improvement and potential side effects. So this is basic physiology. Nobody should be getting this treatment for primary hypogonadism. Now, secondary hypogonadism. So this is where your testes respond and still work, yet the signals from your brain are weak, right? So the brain's not signaling well. In other words, the luteinizing hormone is low. The testes can still respond. So, logically thinking, like, if we raise luteinizing hormone, that, like, through a SERM, like Enclomiphene or Clomid, that this will result in more testosterone production, which is true. And this is why this quote unquote works. But here's the catch that I don't hear anybody talking about. When you increase testosterone through an increase in luteinizing hormone, one thing that happens is your sex hormone binding globulin also goes up. Now, sex hormone binding globulin binds to testosterone, and what you get left over is called free testosterone. As I mentioned before, this is your usable testosterone that will attach to androgen receptors your body can use. So what you end up doing is you end up jacking up your total testosterone number, and then your doctor thinks, oh man, your testosterone went up like 200, 300, 400 points. You must be feeling amazing. But here's the thing. If your sex hormone binding globulin also rises, at the same time as your testosterone, your free testosterone remains mediocre or the same. So barely improves, and in some cases actually will worsen. So you think maybe my labs are better, okay? But if you're not measuring these comprehensive hormones and all you're looking at is total testosterone, you're going to be tricked into thinking like, oh man, my testosterone's higher, but I don't feel any better. I have the same libido. My energy still sucks. My confidence is still low. I still have the same brain fog. Free testosterone is what drives the symptoms, not total testosterone. And then I see a lot of these guys, they, start messing around with all these supplements like boron and Tongkat Ali and zinc and all these testosterone boosters that are completely nonsense. And here's the part that no one talks about, is that there's also potential side effects that can happen from especially long-term Enclomiphene treatment. If you continually or repeatedly overstimulate the pituitary with, a SERM, number one is you can get an estrogen dysregulation, because blocking estrogen receptors does not lower your estrogen production, right? So you often get like elevated estradiol, you get water retention, you can start to see like mood instabilities, anxiety, emotional flatness, and actually libido reduction. Estrogen's not the enemy, keep in mind, but confusing the brain about estrogen is the problem. Number two, you can struggle with ED symptoms. So this one surprises a lot of people. You think higher testosterone, better erections, right? But erections require, and we've done episodes on this, right? Nitric oxide production, AKA blood flow, proper estrogen balance to total testosterone estrogen balance. And of course, your brain is really critical for getting good erections. So dopamine signaling, nervous system stability, and these SERMs can disrupt all of that. So in a lot of cases, like long-term Enclomiphene therapies, men can report things like weaker erections, loss of like sensitivity, libido, not good. So number three, no improvement in things like drive or confidence or energy, you could say. So this is a big one, right? Men will come to me saying like, my testosterone went up, but I don't feel like, I don't feel like a man still. And it's because testosterone's not stable, right? The neurosteroids are not optimized and your androgens aren't consistent, right? Things like actual testosterone replacement therapy works because it is predictable when done properly, right? Selective estrogen receptor modulators can be very volatile. And here's one that's a lot of people don't know about, which is visual disturbances. So you can get light sensitivity, vision issues. It's rare, but it does happen. And men can start to report things like light sensitivity, blurred vision, floaters, And this happens with estrogen receptor activity in the brain. Like your pituitary can actually swell, and you can get, CNS, central nervous system sensitivity, which is not good. Any swelling in your brain is no bueno. Number 5, your lipids, your liver, and long-term, cardiovascular health can suffer. So long-term SERM use can disrupt lipid profiles. It can stress your liver enzymes. And, using these chronically, it can cause like many of these problems to worsen. Just keep in mind that actually like Enclomiphene and Clomid were used for female fertility, like short-term endocrine manipulation, right? When you're trying to conceive. So I see men, I had a guy using it for like a whole entire year, which is not something that is healthy. So the SERM use thing is not all bad though. There are times and places, and I do have some men that are using them when they make sense is like short-term fertility preservation, right? If you're on testosterone replacement therapy and you want to preserve your fertility, cycling Enclomiphene or Clomid into, some of your, on a, some doing cycles of this SERM can make sense to make sure you preserve your fertility, preserve your follicular stimulating hormone to make sperm. It can also be useful for like a transitional therapy. Somebody who is abusing anabolics, right? Bodybuilders are notorious for this. Somebody who wants to like reboot or restart some of their fertility when they're getting off, heavy anabolic use. So post-cycle recovery, carefully monitored cases when TRT is temporarily inappropriate, potential prostate problems. But even then, they're just a tool, and it's not a foundational therapy, right? They're supportive. So just a plug for actual testosterone replacement therapy, like what people need to know is that if you are in fact somebody who is a candidate for testosterone replacement therapy, like proper actual optimization or replacement doses and keeping you in an optimal range, it does replace what the body lacks. And this will actually do the opposite with sex hormone binding globulin. It will lower your SHBG, so it will improve your free testosterone. So one of the things you want to monitor on TRT is your free testosterone levels. And it can stabilize estrogen, okay? Also enhance dopamine, improve your confidence, your energy, your libido, your resilience, etc. There's also other therapies to preserve fertility if that matters, adding things like HCG, okay? Managing your estrogen intelligently, and like stop using these SERM drugs, for something that they're not doing, right? So here's the truth that most clinics won't say, right? SERM numbers look better, okay? It can make your total testosterone levels look better, okay? But actual candidates for testosterone replacement therapy who are getting the right treatment, that makes their life better. So, if you're a man who like trains hard, works hard, carries responsibility, managing all that stress, of that life brings in today's society, right? And you want to preserve all of these, beautiful things that are possible to you if you are really focused on your health, performance, recovery. You don't need these little hacks and tricks or side doorways to do it, right? You need stable hormones. Intelligent dosing matters a lot. Real monitoring, making sure that you're doing it properly with, guided therapy that's being monitored closely with a long-term strategy, right? Because using the SERMs, for example, is basically just chasing lab values. It's not actually optimizing your function, and if you actually want something that's going to, help you long-term, again, you want to start with comprehensive labs that are really seeing what's going on under the hood. So I'm a huge proponent of that. If you're somebody who is already doing the work, right? You're eating a protein-based whole food diet. You're lifting weights routinely and doing some aerobic conditioning. You're optimizing and focusing on getting good quality sleep. You're managing stress levels in your relationships, and you're drinking plenty of water and supplementing intelligently. And you're still suffering with things like, confidence issues, low libido, energy problems, recovery from your training, loss of muscle mass, and of course, like libido issues, definitely get some, get some comprehensive labs that are really looking at the whole hormone picture. This is what we focus on with our Weaponized Body labs. So, if you're looking for help in getting actual, real world data that's going to help you, shoot me a DM. Of course, check me out on Instagram, the Weaponized Dad. Send me a message anytime. I'm here to help you guys. And I appreciate you guys listening as always, trying to bring useful information when it comes to this world of, hormone optimization. And, obviously we like to lean into as much as we can naturally as possible. But sometimes, there are strategies that can really help with this, current world that we live in. Real world strategies that we can optimize and create lifelong strategies for you that will give you great performance, health, recovery, and longevity. So, as always, I appreciate you guys listening. My name is Dr. Ryan Hewitt, and I will check you guys next time.